Hi there, I'm Alice and I'm 41 years old. I work as a TV broadcaster. My husband, Jack, is also 41 and runs a photography studio. We've known each other since high school and started dating back then. We tied the knot at the age of 26, and we were each other's first boyfriend and girlfriend. It felt like we naturally ended up together without ever considering anyone else. When I was 25, I tragically lost my parents in an accident. I couldn't imagine what life would have been like if I hadn't had Jack, who became like family to me. After we got married, Jack moved into the house my parents left me, and I felt protected by both my parents' memory and Jack. 2 years into our marriage, we were blessed with a son, and our happiness multiplied. Jack was incredibly supportive, sharing household chores and taking care of our child. He became the ideal husband for a working couple. However, my mother-in-law, Emily, didn't find it amusing that Jack, being a man, did the housework. Let me share an incident that happened 10 years ago. When our son started elementary school, Emily, who lived about 30 minutes away by train, started visiting our house more often. This was because the after-school care at elementary school ended earlier, and we needed her help to pick up our son, who couldn't stay home alone yet. Around the same time, my father-in-law, Steve, had retired and was at home. However, he couldn't handle household chores. Jackson had always been a housewife, and whenever Jack naturally started preparing meals in the kitchen, she would mutter that a man shouldn't be in the kitchen or express disbelief at the idea. She couldn't let go of the traditional notion that women should be housewives. Even when I first visited Jack's parents' house, Jackson said to me, "Alice, we're going to quit your job, right?" She didn't seem to like the fact that I had a glamorous job as a broadcaster. However, Jack, who knew me from our high school broadcasting club days, always supported my dream to be a broadcaster. Similarly, I supported Jack's dream of being a photographer, and working together was completely natural for us. We managed to get through the tough nursery school days together, and just when we thought elementary school would be easier, when we found the after-school care to be inflexible and unappealing, we had no choice but to rely more on Jackson's help. Once she started coming into our house, she would make comments about the laundry not being folded properly or the cleaning being a bit sloppy. Jack, being the helpful husband he is, would casually reply, "Oh, I'm in charge of the laundry, is that not okay?" Or "It's fine, no one dies from a bit of dust." However, despite Jack's easygoing responses, Jackson would complain to him behind my back, saying things like, "Aren't you ashamed to let your husband do the laundry?" Or "It's bad for our reputation." Despite her critical comments, since we appreciated her help, I just listened without talking back. On the other hand, Emily, with her old-fashioned views, surprisingly liked new things. She owned a smartphone, and she would boast about being the only one among her friends who had one. She used the internet for various things, emphasizing the convenience of modern technology. At that time, our family relied on a delivery service for our weekly shopping orders, placed via paper and delivered to our doorstep. This seemed to displease Jackson, who would suggest that I should go shopping myself and call the delivery fee a waste. However, when she discovered that the service could be ordered online, she urged me to embrace the convenience of the internet. Despite our differences, Jackson would stay late at night when Jack and I were preparing dinner, claiming she had to go back for Steve's dinner. Steve couldn't handle any housework, and when I asked Jack why he, growing up in such an environment, was so cooperative with household chores, he shared that his mom always complained about his dad not helping. He decided that when he got married, he would definitely help out to avoid being complained about, learning from the negative example. Jackson, however, found it amusing that her son did housework, while she was angry that her husband didn't. I couldn't quite understand what would satisfy her, but it seemed like she just enjoyed complaining. Trying to keep my distance, I had no idea that Jackson would end up doing something drastic, like selling our house without permission. That summer, I was offered a rare opportunity by my company to go on a 2-month business trip overseas to participate in a sports broadcast at the World Championship. Excited and feeling rewarded for my efforts, I consulted with Jack. Despite his busy schedule, he expressed his willingness to help, but was unsure if he could manage taking care of our son, Johnson, while working. That's when Jackson, who was listening, offered to take care of things at home for a while. Despite my concerns based on past experiences, I had no one else to rely on and decided to entrust my son to Jackson. Although we considered having Jack and Johnson stay at Jack's parents', it would be difficult for them to commute to school from there. So Jackson decided to come to our house on weekdays. After successfully completing my sports broadcasting work during a 2-month business trip overseas, I returned to the US, exhausted yet relieved. As I arrived at my house on a weekday afternoon with a heavy suitcase in hand, I was surprised to find Jackson eagerly waiting for me at the entrance. As I was about to thank her for taking care of the house during my absence, she uttered something unbelievable. "This house sold for $300,000, so I'm taking the full amount." My tired mind couldn't comprehend her words for a moment. "This house, our house?" I asked in disbelief, to which she replied with shining eyes, "Yes, this house." "Oh no, we don't own a house." Confused and struggling to make sense of the situation, I replied just that, and Jackson burst into laughter, exclaiming, "What are you talking about, Alice? Why would you lie like that? There's a registration certificate in your name. I won't be fooled." Feeling the conversation was going nowhere, I decided to change the topic to calm my heart down. "Well, let's set that aside for a moment. Why are you selling it?" Jackson confidently stated, "What belongs to the wife belongs to the husband and therefore to me. I'm using it to build a new house." Her eyes were bloodshot as she spoke, and I started to feel scared. "A new house, exactly. Mine and my husband's. You guys will live there. This way, Jack won't have to do household chores anymore. I've been so sorry for him." Confused and concerned, I raised my eyebrows. I couldn't understand why she was doing this. Trying to piece together the story, I discovered that shortly after we got married, when Jack was in the kitchen doing chores, Jackson had told him to let me do such things. Jack, being the supportive husband, replied, "No, this house is Alice's. I have to do at least this much." Unfortunately, Jackson misconstrued this to mean that Jack was doing chores because he was living in my house. Jackson always believed that Jack actually didn't want to do household chores and preferred to focus on his work. The idea of a working couple cooperating in household chores just didn't exist in her mind. Furthermore, I later found out that after Steve retired, his pension was less than expected, and they struggled to find re-employment. This led them to feel insecure about continuing to live in their rented apartment, and in desperation, they resorted to the unthinkable action of selling our house without permission. I tried to explain to Jackson that this house isn't just mine, and Jack thinks it's normal to do housework. However, she interrupted me, calling them lies and accusing me of interpreting things to suit myself. Wanting to get the facts straight, I asked, "Where did you sell it?" She replied, "I sold it to a real estate company. They did an easy online assessment, and it's a convenient word, isn't it?" I looked up the real estate company online and found a website that seemed right. However, when I tried calling them, there was no answer. When I asked Jackson if she had visited the real estate company at the address, she replied, "No, I didn't go there. You don't need to go do that nowadays." I insisted, "First, go to this address, Jacoro. If you don't, I won't discuss this any further." Reluctantly, she left, and the next day, I received a tearful call from her. "It's not there. The real estate company doesn't exist at the address." There was only a dilapidated wooden house, seemingly uninhabited. Astonished by her foolishness, I burst into laughter when she returned. She explained that during my absence, she found a house registration certificate in my name and thought she could sell it. She contracted the real estate agent who shamelessly assured her, "Even if you're not the owner, it's fine if you have that certificate. Some people pass away after all. Just provide us with the family register and signature certificate." Naively believing them, she sent all the requested documents to the agent. When they found a buyer, they asked for a deposit, half of the commission fee. So she transferred $4,800, half of the $9,600 commission on the supposed $300,000 sale. Shocked by the situation, I called the police to explain, and 2 officers came to our house. It turns out that this kind of internet fraud, posing as real estate agents, has become common. They offer free valuations, ask for official documents, introduce a supposed buyer, take a fee, and then disappear. With many vacant houses and the ability to fake addresses for document delivery, such frauds have become more common. The fraudsters likely wrote their name on a postbox and received the documents there. Jackson was trembling as she answered the police officer's questions, revealing the depths of her gullibility and the unfortunate consequences of her actions. The officer, tilting his head in confusion, asked if the house deed I sent belonged to my daughter-in-law. Realizing the gravity of the situation with the third party involved, Jackson nervously started explaining, "I thought it belonged to my son." However, the officer countered, "Even if it was your son's, isn't it strange trying to sell someone else's house?" Red-faced, Jackson blurted out a nonsensical excuse, claiming, "No, it's not like that. Alice asked me to. She wanted to get the house appraised to sell it." The officer turned to me, asking if it was true, to which I simply replied, "No, I didn't ask for that." Unsure of whom to believe, the officer eventually seemed to trust me over the visibly distressed Jackson. He lectured her, saying, "She says she didn't ask for it. You shouldn't sell things on your own, madame. Normally, this wouldn't even be possible. This is just outrageous." Jackson bit her lip, looking down in silence. The officer, now convinced of Jackson's rash actions, inquired about the deed registration, asking if she sent a copy. In a faint voice, she replied, "No, it was the original." The officer was even more astounded and looked at me in dismay. He asked, "Will you file a theft report?" I answered, "No, that document is invalid now. Actually, this house has already been sold to someone else. When we saw it, we could do so just with the registration identification information. The law had changed, so the deed registration wasn't needed." Indeed, I had received the deed when I inherited the house from my parents, but it was unnecessary when selling the house, so I kept it as a memento. Jackson, unaware of this, thought that the deed meant I still owned the house. Normally, real estate agents would request or retrieve a copy of the deed themselves for verification, but fraudsters didn't need such details. After all the embarrassment, Jackson looked at me resentfully and muttered, "Why didn't you sell a house? It's a curse to sell your parents' home. People in flashy jobs are like this." I met her gaze and said, "Jack wanted it. He needed a lump sum." Jackson exclaimed, her face turning even bluer with surprise, "Jack, why?" At that time, Jack wanted to start his dream photography business, but didn't have enough funds. The house was our only significant asset, so we sold it to an acquaintance and rented it back. When I explained everything in one go, Jackson's shoulders slumped as she muttered, "So Jack's success now is because you sold the house." Well, I could say that, but I believe that spouses should stick together through thick and thin. "We're in this together," I replied. Upon hearing this, Jackson suddenly began to cry bitterly. "I wanted to work too," she sobbed. "My husband can't do anything even now after his retirement. He does nothing. What has my life been for?" Her litany of complaints against Jack continued, leaving the police officer struggling to complete the report. Ultimately, the fraud report was filed, but even after 10 years, the culprits have not been caught, and it's unlikely that the money will ever be recovered. Following the incident, Steve became vigilant over Jackson's actions, taking over all financial control and denying her any access to money. Whenever she needed something, she had to request it from him and would be given cash. Feeling suffocated, Jackson complained to Jack, who reminded her that she'd brought it upon herself. Now, with no disposable income, she works through senior job listings and currently teaches the elderly how to use smartphones. She's well regarded for her ability to empathize with the struggles of old learners. Steve, perhaps due to his pride, found senior jobs unsuitable, and quit soon after starting, providing no income. Nowadays, Jackson is busier, often leaving him with household duties as she goes out. Interestingly, he has taken an interest in cooking and is getting quite good at it. The roles in Jack's parents' house have reversed, but both seem to have found new fulfillment. As for me, after my overseas business trip, I successfully climbed the career ladder and now anchor the evening news, while Jack's photography studio is thriving. Together, we've managed to save enough to consider buying back and renovating the family home. We are grateful to our acquaintance for allowing us to keep the house despite the outrageous incident. It worked out well for Jack's parents in the end. Our son is turning 17 and approaching adulthood, so I shared this story with him as a cautionary tale about internet fraud. However, to preserve his grandparents' dignity, I've kept the part about them trying to sell our house a secret. It's important to learn from experiences while being mindful of how we share such stories, especially when it involves family.